Welcome back to Talkin Sports with Jake, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. We got another great show for you guys. I'm doing my NHL preview today, but first, we're going to do a little bit of non-NHL stuff. First, let's take a look at the standings. Didn't change too much, so I just went over this yesterday. Can't change too much from day to day, but we only got about a week and a half or so left in the regular season, so of course, every single game now matters in the American League. In the West, Astros already locked up the West. Yankees lose to Toronto, a walk-off homer by Vladdy in the bottom of the ninth, so they have not clinched the division yet, but have clinched the playoffs, and their match number is like 1 or 2, so they should rip up the American League East, and the league's youngest team, actually, Cleveland Guardians, have already clinched the American League Central in the wild card. Toronto wins, so they're 3 games up for the first wild card. Looks like that's where they'll be seeded. Tampa's the second wild card. They're a half game ahead of Seattle, who has the last spot. And Baltimore is right there, 3.5 games out. They're not done. Being said, Seattle has a very easy schedule left. They play Texas, who's not good at all. They have another series with Detroit, and I believe Oakland. Well, Baltimore's got to play Boston for a couple more games. Boston's not great either, but they do have a little bit of firepower. That's the division rivalry. Those games are always close. And then they get the Yankees, who of course are a very good team, and the Blue Jays, who are a very good team. Both teams, of course, are in the playoffs. So, Baltimore are probably not going to make it, but they are not out of it yet. Seattle's not playing very well right now. And they are 3.5 games out. In the National League, in the West, Dodgers, of course, already locked up the number 1 seed in the National League. 106-47, that ridiculous mark. New York Mets already clinched the playoffs. They are a game ahead of the Braves. Braves won last night over Washington. Mets happened that night off. Mets are a 3-game series against the Oakland Athletics, one of the worst teams in baseball. They are the worst team in the American League and the second worst team in all of baseball besides the Washington Nationals. So they started a 3-game series with Oakland. Atlanta's got 2 more with Washington, and then starting on the 30th, I believe starting Friday to Sunday, the Mets are in Atlanta for that big 3-game series that'll probably be the season, and then the Mets finish up at home against Washington, and then Atlanta finishes up against the Marlins for 3 games in the first week of October. The Mets lead Atlanta by 1 game in the National League. Both teams have clinched the playoffs. Whoever does not come in first place will be the first wild card of the National League. That is guaranteed. But for the division, Mets are 1 game ahead of Atlanta. Both teams have 8 games left. Atlanta 2 more against Washington, 3 then the series with the Mets, and 3 with the Marlins. Mets have 3 against Oakland, 3 with Atlanta, and then or maybe the Mets have an extra game. They both have like 8 or 9 games left. And of course, starting Friday is the 3-game series between the two in Atlanta. The Cardinals should win in the Central. They lead Milwaukee by about 6.5, 7 games. So the Mountain number is like 1 or 2 to clinch the Central. They should wrap that up. San Diego still second wild card, still a game and a half ahead of Philly. And Milwaukee remains a game and a half behind the Phillies for that last wild card spot. That's what we got in the National League. Before we get to NHL, something I meant to talk about yesterday that I did not get a chance to talk about last week that happened towards the end of the week last week. Of course, Boston Celtics head coach Ime Udoka has been suspended for the entire season because he broke some sort of, he said, well, what originally was said that he broke organizational rules. And the first we didn't know what that was. Then it came out that he had a, consensual, but an intimate affair with one of the female employees of the Boston Celtics. So then some details came out. There's a rumor that supposedly he was fooling around with 2 different women, so it wasn't even 1 woman. Supposedly he made an unwanted comment towards a female Celtics employee, and he is engaged to Nia Long, who is an actress. She's been in a bunch of stuff. She was in the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air with Will Smith way back when. They've been engaged for 7 years, and they have a child together. And he was, since July, has been having an affair with at least 1, if not 2, female members of the Celtics organization. Remember, this has nothing to do with the NBA. this internal thing, but Celtics decided to suspend him for an entire year. And then they have promoted, I think, Joe Lazula or something like that. I know he is, and I think his first name's Joe. Joe Lazula. He's going to be their interim head coach. He's 34 years old, young guy. He's been their assistant since last year. He was promoted to the top assistant coach because Will Hardy was one of their top assistants. I think he was their top assistant. He took the head coach job in Utah, and Will Hardy took one of their head coaches, took one of their other assistants with him to Utah. So by default, Joe Lazula was made the interim head coach. So he will be the interim head coach this year. That's an interesting situation. Boston, of course, Ime Udoka was praised for his job last year in his first year as a head coach. He was a long-time assistant, was in San Antonio for a while under Greg Popovich. He was in Philly briefly. He was also in Brooklyn briefly. Became a head coach last year for Boston and took them to the finals. Took the Celtics to the finals in his first year, lost in 6 to the Golden State Warriors, of course, but had an incredible year. Went to the finals in his first year, was a head coach of the year candidate. I had people praising him. This guy's a great coach. What a great choice by Brad Stevens, who of course was the former coach. They moved him to the front office after Danny Ainge left. And now all of a sudden, he's suspended for a year, and who knows what happens. Do you really bring him back? And also, if Joe Lazula has a good year, if they go to, let's say, even the Eastern Conference Finals, which they could, they got to have one of the top teams in the East. The East is loaded, but they have one of the top teams in the East. They didn't really lose anybody notable. And they bring in a really good scoring guard in Malcolm Brogdon. Didn't give up that much for him. Get him from Indiana. This team really going to regress. I mean, yes, there are certain teams that are better. The Cavs were 7th in the East. They just brought in Donovan Mitchell. And they had injuries last year, so they're definitely going to be a lot better. Milwaukee will be there. Miami will be there. So it's a tough road. But I don't see Boston not being at least top 4 in the East. I can see them being in the conference finals at least. If Joe Lazula takes him to the conference finals, do you bring back Udoka? And for Joe Lazula has been a head coach candidate now for a couple of years. He's probably going to be a head coach. He's probably going to be a head coach somewhere in the next 2 or 3 years anyway. So if he does a good job this year and they have a deep playoff run again, do you let Lazula go? And he'll I would think would probably get a head coach job somewhere else, and then bring back Udoka, who we all know can coach. He showed it last year that he can be a quality coach in this league, but possibly having lost all the respect of a lot of the players in the entire organization for what he did. Do you create some sort of locker room clash, which could lead to some regression, which that partnership may end up working out after all? Do you take that chance? I mean, if Lazula proves not to be a quality coach and they're first losing the first round, all right, maybe bring him back. Right, maybe Lazula's not all that, but if Lazula does a good job and they have another deep playoff run, I don't see how Udoka gets his job back. So, very interesting situation. Look, guys. This is how you ruin your career. Ime Udoka did. This is how you ruin your career. You look at a guy like Tiger Woods had his stuff, didn't quite ruin his career. Really, but he did start going downhill from there, on and off the field. Look at a guy like Antonio Brown, who never actually technically committed the crime. I know the assault charges, I believe, were false, but he was accused of domestic violence by 2 different women. I'm not sure if it was ever true, but no one's ever going to sign him. And he also has had other issues. This is how you ruin your career, okay? This is how you ruin your career. And Ime Udoka had a very promising career. He was a player at one point. He was a great assistant coach for 3 different teams. The Spurs, under maybe the greatest head coach ever, Greg Popovich. He was in Philly, got some playoff experience there, worked with some great players in Brooklyn. Got to be the head coach of the Boston freaking Celtics, maybe the greatest NBA organization in the world. Takes them to the finals in his first year. Is in line to have an incredible career there. Probably going to win at least 1 championship. Is going to make so much money. On top of what he's already made, he's probably already made millions of dollars between his being an assistant coach, what he made last year as a head coach, and I'm sure he made at least a tiny bit as a player. Wasn't very good, but he did play for a little bit. And now it may go all down the drain. He's not coaching anywhere right now, obviously for this year, and then if Celtics will let him go, will we get a second chance? That'll be something that other teams will obviously they're going to look at, is it worth the the bad PR that when they bring him in? So something to look out for. But Ime Udoka will not be coaching the Celtics this year. All right, let's do my NHL preview. So I'm gonna do my standings predictions. I'm going to name a team in their seed. I'm gonna go over their team. I'm gonna go over their off season, and I'll go over the teams that do not make the playoffs either. I'll give you guys my reasons why I have teams ranked where they are. Without further ado, let's get started. Let's start in the Eastern Conference for the number 1 seed in the East. I had the Florida Panthers finishing first. I know that they finished first last year and didn't quite work out because they lose early on in the playoff. They lose to Tampa. I think they lost in 5 games to Tampa in the second round to bring the President's Cup. This is a great team. They have a lot of firepower, this team. Now you make a trade to get Matthew Tkachuk. They give up a lot. They give up Huberdeau, who's one of the best players in the league. You give up one of your best defensemen in that deal, and then you give up another prospect and some draft picks. But this is a great team. They got so many incredible goal scorers. Barkov can give you 35 goals, 90 to 100 points. Now you bring in Tkachuk, who just had 40 goals and over 100 points last year in Calgary. You just have so much firepower over there in Florida. The goaltending was much better. Sergei Bobrovsky, first year, so that $70 million deal was a disappointment. Much better last year. Had him split with Spencer Knight, the youngster, who played pretty well. So the goaltending should be decent. Should be decent again, I would think. The defense, is it the best in the league? No. Is it the reason that they lost early? Yes. I mean, Tampa is a different animal in the playoffs. They can't beat in the playoffs the last few years, but their defensive goaling wasn't good enough for the postseason last year. And they had some other guys. You had Mark Stahl, who's very end of his career. Of course, was on the Rangers for a long time. Spent a little time in Detroit. He can still be some good depth, some better leadership on defense. You bring in Colin White for some forward depth, Nick Cousins for some forward depth. Same thing with Rudolph Balcers, and then you make the big deal to get Matthew Tkachuk in the trade, and you give him an 8-year extension worth $76 million, so he'll be there long term. So Florida should be in line to probably be towards the top of the Eastern Conference again. Made the interesting move not to bring back their interim coach, Andrew Burnett, who took over midseason after Joe Quenneville was fired because of the allegations that came out when he was the head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks. But they brought in, I believe they brought in Bruce Cassidy, right? Or no, excuse me, he went to Vegas. They bring back Paul Maurice, bring him out of retirement. Very good coach, long-term Winnipeg Jets head coach. So he's probably even better coach than Andrew Burnett is. So they should be in line for a nice year. Second in the East, I got the Tampa Bay Lightning. They do lose some pieces. They lose Andre Palat, who's a very good player. That's a very solid loss. He goes to New Jersey with the Devils. We're not able to re-sign him. You end up trading with Ryan McDonough, who's much older now, but is still a solid defenseman who can still move the puck and still probably could have been a top 4 defenseman on the Lightning. He is a good player, but you also bring back everybody else. You re-sign Eric Cernak, all your other free agents, they are all back. You got Vlad Lemestikov in the mix, and you re-sign Sergachev, you re-sign Anthony Cirelli. They get long-term deals. Sergachev got 8 years, $68 million. Cirelli got 8 years, $50 million. You bring back Lemestikov on a 1-year deal. You got an 8-year, $41.6 million to Cernak. You bring in Ian Cole to help out the defense. Same thing with Hayden Fleury. You had some depth, and they still got the best goalie in the world, probably, in Andrei Vasilevsky, who in the regular season is at least top 5, probably top 3. And in the postseason, he might be the best goalie ever. That dude is just amazing. He gives up his GAA heading into last year's postseason for a score like under 1. It's insane. In elimination games, I don't think he's given up more than 2 goals ever. I mean, he outside of the Stanley Cup final last year. Also, the Lightning, they were so nicked up, towards the end of the last year's playoff, because, they just play, their 3rd straight Cup final. So many guys were playing with injuries that they probably should have missed several weeks with, but they were playing through because it was the playoffs. Now that they're healthy, they're fully healthy, and they still have a ton of firepower. Stamkos is healthy, Kucherov is healthy, you have Cirelli healthy, Point healthy. On the event, you still got Sergachev, you still got Victor Hedman, Vasi, of course. They're still going to be hard to beat, and they could easily be in the Cup final again, honestly. At third, I got the New York Rangers. I'm a big Rangers fan. I am very excited for what the Rangers are going to do. Last year, they were one of the big breakout teams, finishing fourth in the East, I believe, and second in the Metro. And then going all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. We're up 2-0 against Tampa, but ended up losing in 6 games. But still was an incredible year for the Rangers. I thought they had a pretty good offseason. You lose a couple of pieces. You lose Strome, who's probably your second best center. Both the guys you bring up at trade deadline who played well, Frank Vetrano and Andrew Kopp, were not re-signed. But they also did sign Vincent Trocheck, who's a really good player. He'll be our second line center most likely. Really good player from our Florida Panther and Carolina Hurricane. He's a solid scorer. He can give you probably 20 goals, 50 or 60 points. He's a great defender. He plays both sides of the puck. He's very tough to play against. Chris Drury loves his tough guys, the guys he's brought in since he's been the GM since last year. Bringing in Ryan Reeves to be an enforcer. Making him a trade when he traded Buchnevich was really a money thing, but in return he got back a guy who will have Sammy Blais, is a toughness guy. The reason he brought in Jared Tenorti, who was a depth defenseman last year, was a guy who was there for toughness. So Drury loves his two-way guys who can score, but also his toughness guys. He really likes those guys. So Trocheck's a really good fit for the Rangers. Should he have gotten a 7-year deal? Probably not. Probably should have only gotten 4 or 5 years. But I think $39.3 million. That's $5.6 million a year. About that, he'll make $5.6 million this year. I think that's fair. He's a really good player. Of course, they got a top 2 goalie in the league in Shesterkin. I think him and Vasi are interchangeable for the 2 top goalies in the league. It's them and pretty much everybody else. There's a lot of other great goalies. Frederik Andersen, Jacob Markstrom. There's plenty of other really good goalies, but those 2 are definitely the cream of the crop. What Shesterkin did last year was amazing. Vezina Trophy. And then they have depth. They lose Alexander Georgiev, who didn't have a great year last year anyway. They bring in Yaroslav Halak from our Islander, Boston Bruin. He's bounced around. He's a pretty good backup. Bring him in. He's 37. He'll be a good veteran leader. Maybe could teach Shesterkin a thing or two. When Shesterkin needs a day off, you don't have to worry about, Alexander Georgiev, just falling off with Georgiev, which what kind of happened last year. I think Halak will probably be a better backup than what Georgiev was last year. They also signed Louis Domingue, who was the Penguin starter for most of the playoff series against the Rangers last year. I thought played pretty well. His numbers, won't look great, but he's a third-string goalie who, all of a sudden, in overtime in game 1 of the playoffs says, all right, you're in, and finished off, and then game 2, it's like, all right, you're in for the rest of the series. He played all of except most of game 1, and didn't play game 7 because they got Tristan Jarry back. And they got, you got Mika Zibanejad, who's an assassin. Artemi Panarin's an assassin. He's one of the best puck movers in the league, and he can give you 30 goals. Chris Kreider had over 50 goals last year. He made a run at the Rangers single-season record. Will we have 50 again? Probably not, but I think he can give you at least 35 to 40 goals, 80 or 90 points. He's the guy, when he first came up, we thought, this guy had 40-goal potential. Never really showed it. Right before he got the big contract, that was the best year of his career. He had 30-plus goals, like 80-plus points. But even that was, not quite what he thought it was. And he finally was able to break out these last 2 years. And of course, last year having over 50 goals. And then we got a lot of good young players. Kaapo Kakko from our second pick, who's been a bust so far, but did play very well in the playoffs. He just re-signed to a 2-year deal. So just, people forget, Kakko is just 21 years old. He's a year older than me, and I'm a junior in college. Isn't that crazy? That's insane. Some of these NHL players come to like 19 years old. Like to think that there's people younger than me making millions of dollars and scoring 30 goals a season in the NHL. It's mind blowing. Alexis Lafreniere, who in the first overall pick still hasn't broken out the way we thought it would, but still, I thought played very well last year. Had 19 goals last year. Had a very good year. Also played very well in the playoffs. I like Philip Hito, who has not been good so far. Another more top prospect. He also played very well in the playoffs. That kid line with Lafreniere, Kakko, and Hito was one that was maybe their best line in the postseason last year. People don't realize that. And their top line, yes, Chris Kreider was Chris Kreider. Mika was Mika. Artemi Panarin was playing hurt, so he wasn't quite himself in the postseason, if I'm being completely honest. A lot of guys playing. I mean, Ryan Lindgren missed some time. When he was playing, he was playing through God knows how many injuries. And you had, certain guys, I think, Strome missed some time in the playoffs. And Artemi Panarin was playing nicked up. So they had to rely on some other guys, and that line definitely stepped up when Panarin was playing her and Lincoln was playing her and Strome was out. That line definitely stepped up for sure. And we got a lot of young defense from that line of Fox, who's an absolute beast, as well as Brian Lindgren is one of the best deep defensive pairs in the league. Kendra Miller, I think it's a budding star. I like him. He got Truewood as name captain, which I do like. I know people said maybe it should have been Mika or somebody. I don't mind it. I mean, he's a leader, very good player, real good, solid top four defenseman. He had his best year as a Ranger last year, best year of his career. Very good, solid defenseman, really good puck mover, can score, very tough. He's a really good player. And of course, we got Igor Shesterkin. And Joe Gallant did a great job as our head coach last year. He was a head coach of the year finalist. So I think the Rangers, of course, this is a big year because last year, people didn't really see them come. We thought, all right, they got a good young team. Maybe they sneak in the playoffs. Probably a year or two away. And all of a sudden, they end up being a top 4 team in the East. They're one of the league's best teams. And they give Tampa Bay Lightning a run for their money in the conference finals. We're like, whoa, where did that come from? But now they got expectations. People know this is a top team in the league. This is probably a top 3 team in the East, and then arguably a top 5 team in the NHL. And not top 5, but at least top 7 or 8 for sure. They're not these underdogs anymore. They're a cup contender. So now, despite having a lot of young players, so we'll see what happens. But I think the Rangers will have a very good regular season now. I have them finishing 3rd. In 4th, I got the Carolina Hurricanes. Last year, we were ranked 2nd in the East. Won the Metro, but then lost to the Rangers. Blew a 3-1 series lead a 3-2 series lead in the second round against the Rangers. But they're a really well-rounded team. I love Rod Brind'Amour, their head coach. He's an excellent coach, one of the league's best coaches, very underrated. They're really good defensively. They got a lot of great defensemen. Jakub Slavin and Brett Pesky's one of the best deep pairs in the league. And do lose Tony DeAngelo, who I can't stand. But he is a very good player. Is a very good, one of the best offensive defensemen in the league. You still have Brady Shea, who's a very good player. You bring in Brett Burns from long-time San Jose Sharks. You get him in the trade. He's much older now, but he is a really good player still. Really good two-way defenseman. Ethan Bearsley is a youngster who you signed for a year. He's a good player. You bring in Paul Stastny, which is a good move to make. He's 36, but is still a real good, solid player. You got that top line with Svechnikov and Teravainen. You got a lot of good young players. Seth Jarvis had a really good rookie year last year. Losing Pacioretty till probably at least January hurts. He was your big offseason acquisition and was going to really boost your offensive attack, which is probably the reason that they lost in the second round to the Rangers. That's a team that could have easily probably won the Stanley Cup last year. But they will have him back second half of the season at some point. I think their defenses, they're very adequate defensively. I think they'll definitely make up for a little bit of lack of scoring. And then once they get Max Pacioretty about them, I think they'll give him a boost. And with Frederik Andersen healthy, he's a really good goalie. Antti Raan's a very good backup. They should be in for a really good year. 5th in the East, I got the Washington Capitals. This is a couple of teams in the East. Washington, Pittsburgh, even Boston. They are getting a little bit older. They are. They're still a really good team. I mean, Alex Ovechkin, he's one of the all-time greats. The dude's a machine. He's had God knows how many 50-goal seasons. I wouldn't be surprised if he has another 50-goal year. He's got a chance to break Wayne Gretzky's goals record, not points record, obviously, but he could, when he retires, possibly the all-time leading goal scorer in the history of the NHL. Dude, the dude's amazing. Nicholas Backstrom is older, still a very good player. Kuznetsov's a very good player. Tom Wilson's a scumbag, but he is a good player. You still got John Carlson, one of the top D-men. He's very good. And then you definitely add to your goaltending. Darcy Kemper is definitely an upgrade over Ila Samsonov and Vitek Vanecek. You let those two guys walk and bring in Kemper. I think that was a good move. He has 5 years, $26.2 million. Had a really good year last year when winning the Cup with Colorado. And before that, had some decent years in Arizona. So they upgrade their goaltending. They add Eric Gustafsson to their defense. You add Dylan Strome. So I think the Capitals, are a better team. This is a team that last year made a run, I believe, at Florida in the first round, or whoever they played in the first round, Florida or Carolina, whoever it was. No, I think they played Florida in the first round. They made a run to them. They took them to 6 games, and Alex Ovechkin, said, like, he was very upset when they lost. He said, it's on me, it's on Backstrom, it's on Oshie, it's on all of us. So the way he's saying, he was talking kind of like he thought they should have won that series despite being like the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. So I think they're actually a little bit better. Are getting a little older, but they are still a good team. So I got them finishing 5th. 6th, I got the Pittsburgh Penguins. Okay, the Penguins are definitely a team that's starting to age. Sidney Crosby's getting older. Again, Malkin is getting older. Chris Letang is definitely getting older. This team is definitely starting to age. Malkin is 36. I think Crosby's like 34, 35. Letang's got to be right around there. They do keep the band together, which questionable whether that's a good idea or not. You give Malkin 4 years, $24.4 million. You bring him back. You bring back Raquel on a 6-year deal with $30 million. Kasperi Kapanen's a guy you re-signed for 2 years. You do add Jan Ruda to your defense on a 3-year deal. You add Josh Archibald for depth for your forwards. You also have Jay Guntel there, who's still obviously in his prime. He had 40 goals last year despite being nicked up a teeny tiny bit. Tristan Jarry, who played very well last year, you'll have him healthy. I don't think this team is a Stanley Cup contender. I do think they need to start looking at the future at least a little bit, which is why I wouldn't much if I would have given Malkin 4 years. I would have tried maybe for a little bit of a shorter-term deal. Of course, he was also looking like he might be leaving. Probably they kind of were forced to do that. But I do think they're still a real solid team. I have them finishing 6th in the East. Okay, these last 2 teams might be a bit of a surprise. Finishing 7th, I have the Detroit Red Wings, who of course have been pretty much a dumpster fire for the last several seasons. Of course, they had that crazy 25-year whatever it was playoff streak, and then they haven't made the playoffs in probably 6 or 7 years. They've been terrible, but they were a little better last year. Still not great. They were a little bit better. Were much more competitive, and they made a lot of moves this offseason. They add to their offensive attack. They bring in Andrew Kopp, who, of course, finished off with the Rangers last year. Had a very good year last year. They bring in Dominic Kubalik from a rookie year of Chicago, who's fallen off since then a bit, but he's still a good player. You bring in David Perrin, who's a really good scorer on your second other line. Really good on the power play. Add to your defense, we bring in Ben Sherry, who's a solid player. Mark Syke is a good depth piece. Oli Ma is a pretty good defenseman. And one move I really like, they bring in Val Huso. Had a really good year last year in St. Louis. He got a lot more playing time than expected. You could argue the better goaltender in St. Louis over Jordan Binnington last year. They couldn't afford to pay him since they already had Binnington, so they traded him to Detroit, and they gave him a 3-year extension. I think he's the guy who's going to be a real good goalie in this league if given him a chance, which now he has. So I think Detroit's a lot better, and they have so many good young players. Dylan Larkin, Lucas Raymond. They have a lot of good young players, and now you add some proven veterans to that mix. You get yourself a real goaltender in Val Huso. I think Detroit will be a lot better. I think that they sneak in the playoffs. And finishing in 8th, that last spot, I got the Ottawa Senators. I have the Ottawa Senators finishing in 8th in the Eastern Conference. Ottawa is also a team that has been one of the league's best teams for quite a while now. But they also had a big offseason. They made the big move to get Alex DeBrincat in a trade with the Chicago Blackhawks. He's a guy who's put up back-to-back 40-goal seasons, one of the best goal scorers in the NHL. You had Claude Giroux, who's a little older, but still a real good second or third line center. Very good on the power play. He's got a lot of playoff experience. You lock up Josh Norris for 8 years, over $63 million. You lock up Tim Stutzel, another one of the best young players in the NHL. He gets in the year extension worth $66.8 million. Now you recently Branchham's a solid defenseman. You bring in you extend Matthew Joseph, a youngster from Tampa Bay Lightning player who had a good year last year. They got a really good top 6 with DeBrincat. Drake Braverson's underrated guy, who's a really good young player. You got Norris. Brady Tkachuk's a great player. Tim Stutzel, that top 6 is outstanding. The bottom 6, I think, has some solid pieces. Austin Watson's a guy who put up 10 goals last year. You got a lot of young players who are unproven, but have a lot of 21, 22, 23-year-old guys who are higher draft picks, some first-round picks. How will defense and goaltending hold up? That's the big question, along, of course, their youth. But you got Tom Chabot, who's an excellent D-man, very underrated, one of the best D-men in the league. You got some other guys. You got Brandstrom there. You have some other guys. You got some young guys. We'll see if they step up. Goaltending, we'll see what happens. Cam Talbot and Anton Forsberg is the duo right now. Talbot, of course, had that one huge year with the Rangers when Henrik Lundqvist was injured that 1 year. And then he had one big year, I think, in Edmonton. Besides that, he's had some bad year, but the last couple years he's been pretty solid. Can he as a full-time starter be consistent? We'll see. In 10-4, but I think he's a pretty good backup. Obviously, I wouldn't take him as my starter, but as a backup, I think he's pretty good. Had like a 2.8 GAA last year in 29 games. That's pretty good for a backup. So I think I was going to score a lot of goals this year, and I think they'll be just good enough defensively to sneak in the playoffs. For the teams in the East that are not getting in, let's go over them. Start with some ones that you kind of might be like, really? You don't have them in? Let's start with the New York Islanders. Okay, I don't mean to be biased as a Ranger fan, and I hate the Islanders, but I don't like what they did this offseason. I don't think they make the playoffs. This is a team, obviously, prior to last year, had been to the Eastern Conference Finals in back-to-back seasons. 1 year was in the bubble year, and then the year after the bubble year was a slightly shortened season, 72 games, 10 games last day, also got the conference finals. They did have a lot of injuries last year. They got hit by COVID really, really hard. Every team had COVID issues last year, but the Islanders were by far hit the most. They, of course, Zdeno Char retired. My screen says he was 45. I think he's at least 55. He played like he was about 65. He was completely washed. Great player. Might be in the Hall of Fame, but they might be better off without him. They bring back some guys. They bring back, they lock up Dobson on a 3-year deal. Kiefer Bellows gets his. He got time to the contract. He's a good young player. I do like the Romanov move. He did struggle a little bit as a rookie, but he's a guy who's a really, really, really good prospect. Still just 22. I think he's a pretty good player, and he's only going to get better. He re-signed Cal Clutterbuck for 2 years. But this team is so freaking old, okay? They are so old. Lou Lamoriello, the game has passed him by. He's had a great career as a GM. He put together all those great Devils teams. He got to the playoffs with the Maple Leafs. Never did much, obviously. Honestly, outside of those Devils teams with Toronto, he built some playoff teams, but he couldn't get out of the first round. They can't get out of the first round either without him, but that's besides the point. He's not done a good job here. He has had so many chances to get some big free agents. A couple years ago, they thought he was going to sign Artemi Panarin. Nope. He goes across town to the other New York team, the Rangers. They thought they were going to sign Sergei Bobrovsky. Nope. Goes to Florida. That was probably a good move not signing, but still, they thought that was another big guy they were going to land. Last year, they were trying to clear cap space to sign Gabriel Landeskog, who's one of the premier players in the league for the Colorado Avalanche. Nope. Didn't get him either. This year, he had a chance. There was a bunch of different guys he could have got, whether it was Nazem Kadri or whoever it was. Maybe a Matthew Tkachuk in a trade and an extension. Nope, didn't do anything. They're too old. They have a couple of good players. Brock Nelson had 33 goals last year. I like Jean-Gabriel Pageau. He's a good player. Matt Barzal's a very good player. Outside that, who's scoring goals for this team? I don't understand. I don't know. I like Ryan Pulock, and Ryan Pulock's a very good defenseman. They got some good defensemen with Ryan Pulock. Scott Mayfield's pretty good. Even if Sorokin's one of the best young goalies in the league, he's going to have an incredible career of that guy. But this team is just too old. They need a top goal scorer. They need to get younger, and they just are not doing that. And also, getting rid of Barry Trotz, why? Please tell me why that was a good idea. How? How is that a good idea? I know a couple Islander fans who are watching. Shout out to Glenn Kubik. Shout out to my uncle, my uncle Mike Schnitzer, who I'm sure are watching this. Explain to me how that was a good move. So you say, we want some sort of culture change or philosophy change, so you get rid of Trotz, one of the greatest coaches of all time. He took over the Islanders team that was garbage, takes them to back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals. Last year, despite having a ton of injuries, still was 9th in the East, finished like 20 points out because the East was so loaded. The 8th seed was like Washington with like 101 points, and in the West, they would have been like 5th. I mean, with 80-something points that normally does not get you in, but still, they were able to play a lot better in the second half. The first half, they were a dumpster fire. The second half actually was a slightly decent team. You get rid of him. Why? Why? I know he's very he favors defensive guys. He likes his veterans. But Lambert's been his assistant since he was in Washington. I know he's a guy who's he was their interim head coach when Trotz had COVID. Did a pretty good job. Maybe a future head coach, but is he ready right now? Is he really the right coach of this team? I don't know how much of an upgrade that is. I don't know how that's an upgrade from Barry Trotz, who's one of the best coaches in the league, future Hall of Famers, with top 5 all-time in wins. He won a cup in Washington. He completely turned his franchise around. And then he had the one bump on the road last year. I don't think that was a good move. Know what's going to happen? Lou Lamoriello, he's going to bring in all these old guys, and it's not going to work. They're going to wonder why, and then they're going to realize this guy doesn't know what he's doing. They're going to fire Lou, and he's going to leave him in a pile of rubble, just like he did New Jersey, despite his cups, and just like he did Toronto. So I do not think the Islanders are in a good spot, especially for their future, but even currently, I don't think they get in. On 3-0s, I had the Toronto Maple Leafs out of the playoffs. Probably thinking, yes, of course, they can't win a first-round playoff series if their life depended on it. But they usually are very good in the regular season. Yeah, they have a lot of firepower on offense. John Tavares is still a very good player. Austin Matthews was MVP last year at 60 goals. Mitch Marner is a great player. William Nyman is a really good player. You add Kaya Yarncroc, who's a good player. You re-signed, Pierre Engvall, he's the guy you re-signed. You add some depth defensively with Jordy Ben and Victor Mete. But their defense is not good. They are not good defensively. At all. They got Mark Giordano, who's he's pushing 40. Still a good player, but not what he once was. Morgan Rome is a great player. Outside of him, you got an aging Giordano. Jordy Ben's okay. Victor Mete, they're solid. Probably that might be their third pair. But they're a little old defensively, and their goaltending got so much worse. Jack Campbell had a really good year last year. Very good goalie. They let him walk. And instead, they pick up Ilya Samsonov, who was at best a league average goalie last year in Washington. And they trade for Matt Murray, who is garbage. So their goaltending, which was criticized last year for not being quite good enough, definitely got worse. And defensively, they're not that much better. And they were not very good defensively last year. So, yes, they have a ton of firepower. So maybe they sneak in and lose in the first round. But as loaded as the Eastern Conference is, as loaded as they are, and then you got a couple teams like Detroit, who is on the rise, a young team on the rise. You got Ottawa's another young team on the rise. Toronto team that looks like a little bit older team on the way down. So I think they're definitely going to regress, and just the combination of that and then Detroit now I think are a lot better than they were in past years. So I think Toronto actually misses out. Another team I had coming up short is the Boston Bruins. I do not have in the playoffs. Not only are they starting to age a bit, but they got a lot of injuries, this team. Brad Marchand might be their best player. He's a scumbag, but he is a great player. Gave you 35 goals and 90 points. He's out till probably late November of off-season surgery, and 2 of your top 3 defensemen are out. Troy McAvoy, your top D-man, is out probably until December of off-season surgery. And Matt Grzelcyk, who's one of your best D-men, he's also out probably until about November. He's out the first few weeks of the season. So they're banged up. You obviously, Bergeron at 37, still a great player. Might be a future Hall of Famer. Of course, he's got 5 South trophies. Always has been a very good scorer. Of course, he has a Stanley Cup. You got Pastrnak, who's a beast. You bring back David Krejci, from overseas. I think it's a nice move. You bring in Pavel Zacha, who's a good player. You got Taylor Hall there, but then the rest of the offense is kind of okay. Craig Smith's pretty good. Other than that, offensively, I think they're going to miss Marchand. And defensively, your top D pair now probably is now Hampus Lindholm and Brendan Carlo, which I think is a solid number 2 defensive pair. But as your number 1 D-man pair, I don't think that's great. And with Grzelcyk and out the first at least few weeks, and McAvoy possibly being out until December, I think they could struggle defensively. Linus Olmark is a pretty good goalie. Jeremy Swims is the youngsters, so their goaltending is solid. But defensively, I think they're definitely going to struggle. Being without, Grzelcyk is probably your second or third best D-man until for at least the first 2 or 3 weeks. And then you might be without Charlie McAvoy possibly for the first month and a half of the season. And then they're going to be without Brad Marchand possibly for the first 6 weeks or so of the year. So I think they're going to come out of the gate a little slow. I think that's gonna hurt them, and they're never going to start to age a bit. And I don't agree with them getting rid of Bruce Cassidy. I don't think that's the right move at all. They do bring in Jim Montgomery, who I do like. He's supposedly has gotten himself together after he had some off-the-field issues, off the ice issues, I should say. But I think Bruce Cassidy is still a better coach than him, so I think Bruins definitely regress this year. The rest of the crop in the East, Buffalo, I mean, they're terrible. They got some young guys alike. Tage Thompson, you give a 7-year extension. And, you re-sign Olofsson for 2 years. You bring in Lipshushkin, the defenseman, to a 2-year deal. I like him. I don't know who's stopping the puck for them. That's my issue with them. They bring in Malcolm Subban, and it doesn't impress me. I still don't think they're very good. The Devils, I mean, every year we seem to think, oh, they might turn a corner, and then they don't. Okay, they got some good young players over there in New Jersey. But this team has just been bad for so long. I like Jesper Bratt. I like some of the guys they have. I like Bratt. Jack Hughes is a great player. They got some young D-men I like. Igor Sharangovich is another youngster. Will Bush is a good young D-man. But Mackenzie Blackwood, even when he's healthy, has not been good the last couple of years. If you take Vanchuk, who you bring in, we'll see if he can find himself from a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if he will. I like them bringing Andre Palat. He's a good player. Simon Nemec, though he's the youngster, top prospect who we could see this year. So I think they'll be a little better. But I don't see him getting into the playoffs. Other teams in the East, Montreal's going to suck this year. I'm not going to go over them. They got nothing over there. And that just, the Flyers, they're good. Good Lord. This Flyers team looks terrible. It's scary how bad this Flyers team is, honestly. You got their new head coach, John Tortorella, who's says this is his last run in the NHL, saying, he's concerned about the locker room. They had Tony DeAngelo. Okay. First of all, you're talking about locker room problems. Tony DeAngelo is no stranger to that, and apparently Flyers have them. I wonder why. All right, you remember Justin Braun's good depth, but this team's got nothing out. Carter Hart had a bounce back year, but defensively in front of Hart, they're horrible. Their goal scoring is not good enough. I don't know if Tortorella's going to work there in his last run. I love Tortorella. He was a very good coach of the Rangers. I think he's a very good coach, but this Flyers team just doesn't have enough talent. It's plain and simple. So that's the Eastern Conference. Let's go over to the Western Conference. Finishing in first. I actually have the Edmonton Oilers finishing first in the West. Okay, the West looks pretty weak this year. The defending champs of the Avalanche, they lose some pieces. You have the Flames lost some pieces. The Golden Knights lost some pieces. So, but Oilers were a team who last year surprisingly went to the Western Conference Finals last year. Got swept by Colorado, but still did get there. They got maybe the two best players from the sport, and Connor McDavid, who is just insane. I have never seen an NHL player be this good. And Leon Draisaitl, who's also a beast. They are at least 4 players in the league. Probably maybe the top 2 players in the league. That's how good these two guys are. And you got some other good players. Kyle Yamamoto is a very good player. Rodney Hopkins is a good player. Got some good defensemen. You make the move in net to get Jack Campbell from Toronto. He's a very good goalie. You signed 5 years, $25 million. And you bring in Brett Kulak to help your defense. I think this is a lot of good young players. McDavid and Draisaitl are so young, which is crazy. So I think this team, which was 5th in the West last year, went to the Western Conference Finals, is even better. And the conference, you could argue, is even worse than it was last year. So I think the Oilers might finish first in the West, and they should be a top contender. Second, I got my St. Louis Blues finishing in second. Blues always seem to be in the mix. They're a really good team. They could have been a little better last year. Jordan Banks in a bit of a down year. I think he'll bounce back. You re-signed Jordan Kyrou recently, 8-year extension. They got a lot of firepower there with Tarasenko still a good player, and Ryan O'Reilly and Jordan Kyrou. Robert Thomas is a good young player. You re-signed for an 8-year extension. You got some good, really good defensemen over there. Nick Lane's a solid player. So I think they're still a really good team. I think they finished second in the West. The defending champs, Colorado, got them third. They lose some pieces. They lose Nazem Kadri, who was a big part of their team last year. You lose him. You lose your goalie. You lose your goalie. What's his name? I'm drawing a blank. Darcy Kemper. You lose him. He was a really good goalie last year. You're bringing Alexander Georgiev, who has shown flashes at times with the Rangers, like he could be a really good goalie, but last year didn't think he'd have a great year. I think that's a pretty major downgrade. So that's a big question mark. You still have a bunch of your top guys, though. McCann just became the highest paid player in the league, 8 years, $100.8 million. You bring back Arturi Lehkonen's a really good player. You got Landeskog still. You're Ratton, of course. You got a lot of Cale Makar is insane. He's probably the best D-man in the league. So you still have a lot of top talent. They're still going to score probably more than any team in the league. Very Nichushkin's another guy you bring back. You re-sign Josh Manson. Darren Helms, a guy you have for depth, who's 35 years old now. They're still a really good team. Will they repeat? We'll see, but don't think they'll finish first in the West, but they're still top 3 in the West. They finished third. At fourth, I got the Minnesota Wild. The Wild, I think, are very good. They re-signed Marc-Andre Fleury now, who's older, but he's still a very good goalie. They're struggling in the playoffs a little bit, but I have confidence in them. They still got a good team. They got a good mixture of young guys and then some older guys. Guys like Jordan Greenway. So they got a lot of quality guys over there. You bring in Sam Steele for depth. He's still just 24 years old. I think the goaltending will be better now. Fleury, although is at the end of his career, is still a very good player. Now a full year there under his belt. I think he'll be a lot better. They got a lot of really good defensemen like Matt Dumba. I think the Wild could have a better chance of making a little bit longer playoff run. I got them finishing fourth. Fifth, I have the Los Angeles Kings, who had a good year last year. Of course, this is a team who a few years ago won like 3 cups in like a 6-year span. And they had a couple of down years, were out of the playoffs for a few years. Last year, go back to the playoffs, were I think 5th or 6th in the West. And their team actually has some good young players who have not proved themselves yet. Guys like Sean Dursey, Gabriel Vilardi, Mikey Anderson. Jonathan Quick is still a good goaltender, even at his age. And then you have your veterans. Anze Kopitar can still play for sure. Drew Doughty can still play. So I think they're still a solid team. I got them finishing in 5th. At the 6th spot in the West, I got the Nashville Predators finishing in 6th place in the West. They got a really good goal in UC Saros. Remember, you did not have him in the postseason. Having him help out, I think, will definitely be a boost. You bring in Ian Niederreiter, who's a good player. You bring in Zach Sanford. You lock up Philip Forsberg. You thought you were going to lose. You end up re-signing him. They still got a lot of quality guys over there. And I think having UC Saros healthy is going to be a big boost. So I got Nashville finishing in 6th. In 7th, I got the Calgary Flames. Okay, so the Flames, hear me out. They lose probably their 2 best players. You lose Tkachuk, who had a huge year last year. 4 goals, like 110 points. You lose. And then you lose, obviously, of course, Johnny Gaudreau, 40 points, 40 goals, 100 plus points. He leaves in free. He goes to Columbus. But I forgot to talk about the Columbus Blue Jackets. I know they had Johnny Gaudreau. East is so deep. That's why I had them missing out. In the West, the Flames, in that trade for Tkachuk, they get back They get back Jonathan Huberdeau, who was a beast. That was a huge piece to get back. He's a guy who can give you 40 goals and at least 90 points. They also get back Mackenzie Weegar, who's a really good defenseman. And then you also signed Nazem Kadri to a big contract. So the Flames, I mean, losing Gaudreau and Kachuk, so they got better. I think they do get worse, but they also were very good last year. So I do think Calgary is still a playoff contender. A cup contender? No. Playoff contender? Yes. Also, they'll have Frederik Andersen, who's one of the league's best goalies, healthy, which will help. So I still have them in the playoffs. I got the Golden Knights in 8th, so Knights are a weird team. Last year, missed the playoff for the first time in their 5-year history. That was really mostly because of injuries. That's what and they're gonna have, they're gonna have guys healthy. You'll have Alex Pietrangelo healthy. You'll have Mark Stone healthy. That being said, losing their goalie, Robert Leonard, for the season, that's a big loss. You're looking at Maxime Legacy might be their goalie. I think they need to make a move. I think I don't know who's gonna be stopping the puck for them. And you lose Max Pacioretty. Every year they'll have to lose at least one quality player for nothing because they're so over the cap. You still got some quality players, like I said, Mark Stone, Pietrangelo will be healthy. You bring in Phil Kessel, who's 34 years old, but he's still a very good player now with talent around him. I think could really produce for the Vegas Golden Knights. You got some good defensemen. Brady McNabb's a D-man you have. Robbie Smith's a really good player who you can re-sign. So I don't know who's going to be stopping the puck for them, but they're going to be able to score the puck in the other team's net fine, and they have some good defensemen. So I think they'll be able to sneak in. For the rest of the West, Anaheim Ducks, they have a lot of good young players where, I love Trevor Zegras. That dude is insane. And you bring in John Klingberg is a really good add to your defense. Frank Vetrano and Ryan Strome you add to get a boost in the middle of their offense. You get some other good young players over there. So I think they're a very good team, but they're not quite there yet. John Gibson is good. I think he's underrated. I know he's been up and down. I just think the Ducks defense has been horrible over the years. So I think they're a solid team. I think they'll continue to get better, but they're not quite there yet. All right, obviously, our Arizona Coyotes are a dumpster fire. Blow that team up. They're going to be playing in a $5,000 college stadium. They don't really deserve to be mentioned. The Blackhawks, I mean, they're just not good. Okay, they're not good. I mean, they have Seth Jones. I don't think Patrick Kane will be on the team the full year. I think he gets traded at the deadline. I can see Jonathan Taves going at the deadline. I saw Seth Jones. I don't know who's stopping the puck for that team. Right, they signed Jack Johnson, who's horrible. That team is not good at all. Seattle Kraken, of course, their second year. They did make some moves at Kraken. I like the moves that they made. I like what they're doing. I think the way they're building their expansion team is actually better than what Vegas decided. They brought in a bunch of veteran players and said we're going to try to win now. Of course, they go to the Cup their first year, but then all of a sudden once all these contracts pile up and they keep making big moves to try to push for a Cup and it doesn't work out, they lose to the Capitals in the Cup that year. They're so far off the Cup they had to get rid of a bunch of different players for nothing. They've lost so many guys got nothing back. They've lost so many draft picks. They didn't get a lot of high picks in return for the guys that they moved. And they've made already on their third coach. They had Gallant was doing a good job, and then after making the playoffs 3 years in a row, they got off to a tough start, and they axed him. They brought in the guy that they just fired after one down year, really because of injuries. They let him go. Now they bring in Bruce Cassidy, who's a very good coach. I don't think that's the real way to build a team. I like Seattle taking more younger players, which gives them a lot more cap space. So last year they were still able to make a bunch of moves. Like you saw Philip Grubauer was a really good goalie. Well, who I do think will bounce back this year. Really good goalie. The year before was a beast for Colorado 2 years ago. And then this year you still had a ton of cap space to make some moves, and they did. You signed Andrei Burakovsky to a 5-year deal. He's a really good player. You boost your goalie depth by signing Martin Jones, and you draft Shane Ray, who's expected to go top overall, drops to fourth to them. That's a huge pickup. He's just 18 years old. That's insane. 18 years old. Wow. I think Seattle could take a step forward this year. Do they get in the playoffs? No, but they are trending in the right direction. So kudos to the Seattle Kraken. They are trending in the right direction. Vancouver. Okay, Vancouver played very well last year with once they brought in Bruce Boudreau. A lot of good young players. Brock Besser. You got Elias Pettersson. JT Miller is a great player who would give a 7-year extension. I like Dr. Demko's a good young goalie, but I just, they're not sure they have quite enough firepower. Just not quite enough to get into the playoffs. I think Dallas is going to regress a little bit. They've been very mid the last 2 years, just kind of sneaking into the playoffs. I like Jay Golden, the good young goalie they have, but Jimmy Benn is past his prime. Tyler Seguin is past his prime. Radullov's past his prime. They got some good young players. Dennis Gurinov. I love them bringing Mason Marshman. They're going to ready to play a 4-year deal, get him from Florida. But they just don't have, again, just not quite enough firepower to compete with some of the top teams in the West. And outside of that, it's just the Winnipeg Jets. Last year losing Paul Maurice midseason when he retired. Now he's back in the NHL with Florida. I think really hurt them. That team's getting older. Connor Hellebuyck's starting to regress. They don't have quite this. They're not quite the same anymore. And outside of that, the Sharks are not good. Okay, they are not good. They lose Brett Burns in a trade. They just made they bring in they brought in a new coach and a new GM. They have a lot of young guys with some potential, but they're not there yet. That's my NHL preview. I will be back Friday, not Wednesday. Next cast will be Friday. Game picks will be Friday. Before I go, I'm going to predict the Thursday night football game real quick. I forgot. I don't know what Thursday night football game is, so I got to look that up. This week it will be Dolphins against the Bengals. That's a good game. Dolphins are 3-0, but I'm gonna take Cincy. They looked a lot better. Their offense looked a lot better. Their defense has never been a problem. Tua is banged up, might not play. I'll take Cincinnati on Thursday. First my game pick you'll see Friday. Thank you all for tuning in. Until next time, so long and have a great day.